Having made a video of almost every region of New York State parks on the occasion of the Office of New York State Parks Recreation Historic Preservation Centennial in the year 2024, I would like to make a filler video before I make the last region, that is the Allegheny region. I would like to talk about the former state parks, proposed state parks, and some of the hidden and abandoned elements of state parks, as well as things that I would like to see built in New York's state parks. I found a lot of the information about the past of the state parks from brochures, maps, and travel guides that are found in the New York City Parks Archives, New York State Parks Archives, public libraries, and online. So let's begin. When it comes to state parks that were proposed but never built, one example is the Theodore Roosevelt Memorial Park and Parkway that would have had a state-managed road from the Queens border to Oyster Bay, following today's New York State Route 25A or Northern Boulevard, to the Oyster Bay train station that Theodore Roosevelt frequently used to commute. He died in 1920 at his home in Oyster Bay, and next to the train station, the state acquired private land to build this park, which would have been laid out in a formal garden with fountains and an alley of trees overlooking Oyster Bay and Center Island and Cove Neck, where Theodore Roosevelt's house at Sagamore Hill is the only national park site in Nassau County. In the end, the state did not build this park. In 1928, it opened as a town park by the town of Oyster Bay, Theodore Roosevelt Memorial Park, which does retain some of those landscaping elements that the state had initially proposed. When we look at a 1933 map of Long Island state parks and parkways, this is Southern State Parkway, and you can see Valley Stream, Hempstead Lake, Meadowbrook, Massapequa, and Belmont Lake State Park. The two of the middle state parks here, Meadowbrook and Massapequa, are no longer with us, and I'll explain shortly. Also on this map is Gardner's Point State Park, another former state park. Here is their story. When Robert Moses built parkways, he was known as the power broker, the master builder of New York. Parks next to highways means parks funding for highways and highway funding for parks, as well as a generous green right-of-way to shield the noise of the highways from the suburban developments that were quickly being built on Long Island. So on this map from the 1940s, you see Meadowbrook State Park, Wantagh State Park, and Massapequa State Park. The Meadowbrook Parkway and the Wantagh Parkway were eventually built, connecting to Jones Beach. But in Massapequa Preserve, the southern extension of the Bethpage Parkway was never finished. And so looking at an aerial survey today, the Meadowbrook and Wantagh State Parks are now county-managed wildlife preserves next to these state highways. And Massapequa State Park is also a county-managed preserve, completely undisturbed, as it's been for centuries, while hemmed in by the grid of suburban development and tract housing. Another example of a state park that is a phantom on the maps is Echo Lake State Park, which only appears on Google Maps and nowhere else. I looked in all the archives, I looked as far as I could online and never found any evidence of Echo Lake State Park. And I was unable to edit Google Maps to erase it. So what exactly is this? It's part of the right-of-way for the state-managed Taconic State Parkway. And looking at a 1949 planning map from the Taconic State Park Commission and the New York State Department of Public Works, Echo Lake was a picnic area along the parkway, along with other picnic areas and state parks. Today, there is no picnic area there. It's been abandoned a long time ago, given back to nature. Though there is a driveway and a small house next to that lake. I'm not sure if anyone lives there, if it's private or state-owned, or if it's used for storage. So if you know what Echo Lake is used for and you happen to live near Briarcliff Manor in Westchester County, drop me a comment. Gardner's Point State Park at the eastern tip of Long Island. Gardner's Island is famous as one of the oldest private properties in America, going back to the 1690s, a feudal manor given by the King of England to the Gardner family and still managed by them today. But just to the north of Gardner's Island is a tiny reef, Gardner's Point Island, acquired by the federal government in 1898 to build a fort to protect Gardner's Bay from a potential Spanish and later German invasion that never came. The fort was never finished, and so in 1924, New York State acquired it, the Long Island State Parks Commission, as an island for picnics and the potential booty of Captain William Kidd, who buried it somewhere nearby. But the park was never developed. In the 1930s, the federal government took it back, used it as a bombing range. And after World War II, it became a wildlife preserve that gradually erodes into the ocean. It's the bird sanctuary at Gardner's Point, the 14-acre forgotten state park. On the northern side of New York State, just to the north of the Adirondack Mountains, the undeveloped Minor Lake State Park was given to the Ganyenke community of the Mohawk Nation, Native Americans who occupied territory here, claiming that they never gave it up. But the New York State says they did in the 1790s. A legal impasse where the state lets the Mohawks manage the land, but the Mohawks claim that they do not claim state control of the land. The Mohawks claim it as theirs. State claims it as theirs. It's an ongoing standoff, but a peaceful one that includes cultural products and small businesses managed by the Ganyenke Mohawks. This is not an Indian reservation, but there are Indian reservations throughout New York State and 2 on Long Island. Oneida Lake has Frenchman's Island, where a battle took place during the Revolutionary War in 1779 between the Patriots and the loyalist Onondaga Nation. This was given to the State Department of Environmental Conservation in 2011 and is now a wildlife preserve with a monument on it. Likewise, Hunts Pond State Forest was an undeveloped state park that is now part of a larger state forest, also managed by the Department of Environmental Conservation. In the southern tier of New York, in a relatively isolated region on the border of the towns of Irwin, Addison, Tuscarora, and Lindsay, is the former Pinnacle State Park, which never had a lot of visitors, never made a lot of money, and so it was transferred to the Department of Environmental Conservation and is now part of the McCarthy Hill State Forest, where people used to golf. There is now undisturbed nature. The most recent example of a state park that is no longer a state park, but still a park, is the Mohawk River State Park, which in June of 2024 was given to the town of Niskayuna, which continues to manage it. So it's now Mohawk River Park. The only other example of a former state park that I recall is the Fulton Ferry State Park under the Brooklyn Bridge, which has merged with Brooklyn Bridge Park. Looking at a planning map of the Finger Lakes region from the 1920s, we see proposed state parks and roads. Most of these state parks were developed and became a reality, except for Red Jacket's birthplace, named after a local native chieftain from the Revolutionary War period, and Bluff Point at Keuka Lake, the smallest of the Finger Lakes. But all the others have become state parks. In the Niagara region, in 1922, there's a proposal for a parkway connecting Fort Porter in Buffalo to Fort Niagara on Lake Ontario. In the end, Fort Porter did not become a state park. It was demolished in 1926 to make way for the Peace Bridge connecting Buffalo to Canada. Fort Porter was built in the 1840s when we still had some suspicions against British Canada, even though we're now the closest to friends. And today there's just a historical marker there. The parkway was eventually built by Robert Moses, running from Niagara Falls to Fort Niagara as Niagara Scenic Parkway. Now for the abandoned elements of New York State Park. In Heckscher State Park on Long Island, there was a massive outdoor swimming pool and bathhouse that was destroyed in a hurricane in 2011 and remains abandoned to this day. Looking at this building, you see it's covered with graffiti, even though it's fenced off to the public. What I would like to see happen here is that if this building is not brought back as an outdoor swimming pool, it should become an outdoor graffiti art gallery. That would bring a lot of creative people to this park. Perhaps it could become a skateboarding venue on the site of the swimming pool to show that skateboarding is not just an urban sport. Perhaps the swimming pool here could be turned into a concert venue. I could imagine a rave here with the breeze of the South Bay blowing over the concerts. So I hope the state develops this former pool in some creative fashion that would make Heckscher State Park a unique destination. In Nissequogue River State Park is the former Kinks Park Mental Asylum. And as mental asylums were closed and its patients were deinstitutionalized, a lot of the buildings were either abandoned or demolished. Most of the buildings at Kings Park were demolished, except for the largest one. And when I see this large building, I think of the uses. We have a housing shortage in New York. Perhaps that could be used as housing, or dormitories, or a hotel. Imagine staying overnight at Nissequogue, which is located next to Sunken Meadow State Park, also a very popular destination. It would be sad to see such a large building go to waste, or simply become demolished. The East Bathhouse at Jones Beach State Park. The East Bathhouse was abandoned in 2011 because of budget cuts, while the West Bathhouse can be quite crowded during the summer. Though recently, Governor Kathy Hochul proposed turning this East Bathhouse into a splash playground and possibly also with outdoor movie screens. It would be nice to have film screenings outdoors in Jones Beach with the breeze of the ocean at night. So hopefully this building will also see a creative reuse while preserving its Art Deco architectural elements. Speaking of abandoned Jones Beach, this park also used to have a Field 9. Right now it has 6 fields by the ocean, but it used to have a Field 9. And unlike the rest of the park with its stone Art Deco architecture, this one had a comfort station and restaurant that looked like a ship. But because it was so close to the ocean, it suffered from erosion and was abandoned, demolished in the 1970s. So today it's back to nature and just a memory today at Jones Beach. At Harriman State Park is Seven Lakes Drive. 2 of those lakes, Lake Teorati and Lake Welch, are the closest freshwater beaches to New York City. But there used to be a third, Sebago Beach. Not to be confused with a beach in the state of Maine. It had sand brought in from the ocean, but after Hurricane Irene damaged it in 2011, followed by budget cuts, it was left abandoned, and freshwater grass is now growing on the sand and looks almost like Chernobyl. But hopefully this site will be revitalized and brought back as a public beach. At Sodus Point on Lake Ontario is Beechwood State Park, managed by the town of Sodus, a former Girl Scout camp that was acquired by the state, but then left abandoned. The cabins are in ruins, and so is the former swimming pool. To see these public amenities not being used as they were designed, you'd think maybe there would be a revival, if not by the state, perhaps by a business as a concession, or just leave it the way it is. Though, the way I see it, why not preserve a campsite for camping? Donald J. Trump State Park, yes, that one. Donald J. Trump famously bought these 2 properties in an estate sale in 1998, hoping to build a golf course, but the local towns were against it, and so Donald Trump then donated these lands to the state for a tax break. But unlike other philanthropists who donated their lands to the state, Donald J. Trump then had a hands-off policy, had nothing to do with it other than the legal stipulation to keep his name. So that's why the land remains undeveloped. Likewise, Trump is relatively unpopular in New York, and the state would rather see the name changed or left the way it is right now, undeveloped. Whatever remnants of buildings there were in the park were demolished on account of asbestos. This was the former estate of the president of the Baldwin Elevator Company, who lived nearby in Yonkers, and helped the state build Taconic State Parkway by giving up some of his land to build the parkway that runs past this state park. Now, whether you like him or not, Donald J. Trump is a consequential figure in American history. So I am surprised that he's not contributing towards developing the park, nor is his MAGA base, which could easily contribute money towards a conservancy group, at least for benches, hiking trails, or playgrounds here, at least some way to beautify this space. But for now, we don't know what will happen to it, other than the name still being here. Ironically, the 2 sections of Donald J. Trump State Park located next to Franklin D. Roosevelt State Park, also named after a former president who lived here in New York. New York state parks used to have ski jumping at Bear Mountain and Allegheny State Park, and there used to be a ski hill at Fahnestock State Park. But today, New York state parks are not in the business of skiing, other than cross-country skiing at Fahnestock. Though when I see Bear Mountain, I see this rustic Bear Mountain Inn, I could imagine this mountain brought back to public use. And it would be nice to see skiing here again, even though our winters are a lot warmer nowadays. New York state parks in recent years have become much more inclusive in telling the story of New York State by including parks named after figures contributing to Black history, women's history, LGBT history through park names, events, artworks, and monuments. So that's also a very nice thing to see in recent years. And if you don't have a car or you wish to leave your car at home, some of our state parks are connected by the Empire State Trail, a bike trail that goes from the Battery in New York City to the Canadian border at Lake Champlain and Niagara Falls. So you can bike across some of our state parks. In the Buffalo, Niagara region, there is a public bus that connects to the state parks, another way to reduce pollution and get to the state park without a car. I wish there were more state parks like that, and here are 2 examples. When you look at 2 suburban counties of New York, Rockland County, you see arrows that I've put up for state parks. Practically none of them have bus access, especially Bear Mountain, which is very popular, and Harriman. And I would like to see Transport of Rockland extended bus routes to these state parks, or perhaps create new bus routes, but it would have to be done in cooperation with the state. Likewise, when you look at Suffolk County on eastern Long Island, Only Robert Moses and Captree State Parks have a dedicated bus line, the Suffolk 15 bus that connects to the Babylon Long Island Railroad Station. Other than that, the other state parks marked on this map do not have bus routes, such as Heckscher State Park and Sunken Meadow, which have very popular beaches, or Comsett State Park. One example of a state park in Suffolk County that also has a bus station is Caleb Smith State Park. But looking at the bus station sign, it feels like an afterthought. I would like to see bus shelters there and larger signage, as well as expansions of bus routes to reduce car usage and encourage city dwellers to take the train and the bus to these parks. The two best examples on Long Island are Jones Beach and Robert Moses State Park. Jones Beach has the 88 bus from the Freeport station, and Robert Moses has the 15 bus to Captree and Fire Island from Babylon. In Westchester County and Putnam County, there's Breakneck Ridge on the Metro-North commuter railroad that connects to Hudson Highlands State Park. So you could take a train from Grand Central and find yourself in a state park. Under Governor Kathy Hochul, a new Amtrak platform was added for the New York State Fair outside of Syracuse. So you can take an Amtrak train to the New York State Fair. Though it is a small platform, certainly doesn't look like a fancy station. And I would like to see it developed much better with more frequent train service. Native history in New York State parks has also been highlighted in recent years with more accuracy. When you look at a photograph of a teepee encampment in Jones Beach in the 1950s, you understand that teepees were the architecture of Plains Indians in the American West, nothing to do with the Lenape Nation that lived on Long Island. But in recent years, we have wigwams and longhouses for the Algonquin and Iroquois peoples that inhabited the state from antiquity. Examples of a more accurate respect for Native culture includes Ganondagan State Historic Site, as well as various powwows and celebrations of Native culture that take place in our state parks and historical signs highlighting the indigenous people of our state. I love historical signs. We should have more of them, as well as monuments that mark the entrances to the park that make you feel that you're in a special place. Parks serve an educational purpose, and if you're not interested in Googling them, when you see historical signs, it piques your interest. And by the way, this book by Howard Ford, Sure Signs, The Stories Behind Historical Markers of New York State, is one good way to learn about the signs that tell the story of the state. The architecture of our state parks, from yurts to tent sites to RV parking to postmodern cabins, as well as a lighthouse where you can sleep, there are many ways that you could stay in New York State overnight. But at the same time, there's also vacant buildings. DeVoe Woods State Park in the Niagara region has a former college dormitory built in a collegiate Gothic style that remains boarded up. Certainly, this could become a catering hall, a hotel, something, especially with its proximity to Niagara Falls. Well, for now, I'm thankful it wasn't demolished. When it comes to lodges and inns in our state parks, there's Bear Mountain State Park, Saratoga Spa State Park, and Letchworth Gorge State Park. And an honorable mention for Tohannock Falls, which has a private hotel surrounded by parkland on 3 sides. These are places where you could stay in the park, go to sleep after hiking, and wake up and do some more hiking. But I'm really surprised that Jones Beach State Park never had a hotel, considering that this is a state park with an adventure course, mini golf, swimming pool, a concert theater, beach on the bay, fishing area, nature center, bike trail. I can imagine spending a long day and evening at Jones Beach, and after a concert, why cross the bay? If there would be a hotel or cabins at Jones Beach, I would like to see them built in the same Art Moderne, Art Deco style of the 1930s. Even Donald J. Trump, when he proposed a catering hall at Jones Beach in the early 2000s, tried his best to keep it faithful to the Art Deco style, though there was a lot of glass in the windows there, big windows. But anyway, that plan was canceled. And I would like to see more skateboardings in our state park, because if city parks can do it, why not state parks? So yeah, let's find more places to sleep in our parks. And this brings an end to this filler episode. Just keeping in mind the diversity of our state parks, from waterfalls with lifeguards to a water treatment plant in Manhattan with a rooftop state park, a former rail yard with natural grass overlooking the United Nations, and a massive concert stadium at Jones Beach. There are so many parks around our state, all of them worthy of your admiration and your visiting. Thank you so much, and I look forward to sharing my next video on the Allegheny region, the final and westernmost region of New York State. Thank you so much.